There is a moment, silent, almost invisible, when you vanish from your own life. It doesn't come with a scream. It doesn't come with fire. It slips in quietly, like a shadow passing through a room you forgot to lock. And just like that, you stop being you. Maybe it happened on a Tuesday. Maybe you laughed at something that wasn't funny. Said, "I'm okay," when you weren't even close. Maybe someone asked how you were, and you smiled so well, even you believed it for a second. But inside, something sacred disappeared. It's not the chaos that breaks you. It's the pretending, the constant quiet pretending, wearing a smile like armor, nodding through conversations like a ghost learning human language, going to sleep next to people who have no idea how far you've drifted. You wake up, brush your teeth, answer messages, check your calendar, but your soul isn't invited to any of it. There is a loneliness that doesn't look lonely, a grief that never cries, a slow burning sorrow that never asks for help, because asking feels like weakness. And so, day by day, you master the art of appearing fine. But behind your eyes, a different truth whispers. It aches, it watches, it waits for you to notice. Because the moment you began pretending everything was fine, was the moment you began disappearing. And maybe that's why you're here now. Not by accident, not by coincidence, but because somewhere, beneath all the noise, a part of you is still alive, still burning, still refusing to die quietly. And maybe that part isn't broken. Maybe it's the only part of you that hasn't given up. So I ask you, what if this ache inside you isn't something to escape, but something to follow? What if everything you've been trying to hide is exactly what you need to heal? And what if the part of you that feels the most lost is simply the part that's finally tired of pretending? Let that part speak. Let it breathe. Because maybe, just maybe, that's where you begin again. You became a master of disguise, but not on purpose. It started small, like covering a crack in the wall with a picture frame. A small lie here, a quiet nod there. You adjusted, softened your edges, smiled when it hurt, and slowly, the truth of who you are became inconvenient. So you buried it. Not because you're weak, but because the world doesn't make space for rawness. Because being too much taught you to be less. Because somewhere along the way, survival meant silence. You didn't notice the mask at first. It felt like protection. A version of you designed to be loved, understood, accepted. You told yourself, if I just act like everything's fine, maybe one day it will be. If I become who they need me to be, maybe I'll finally be enough. If I pretend hard enough, maybe the ache will leave. But masks don't just hide pain, they hide possibility. And the more you wore it, the more invisible you became. Now you walk through life as a well-rehearsed script. Perfect smile, perfect tone, perfect lies. All while a quiet scream echoes beneath your skin. This isn't me, but you keep going. Because breaking character feels more terrifying than breaking down. You see, we live in a world that rewards performance. You're praised for being strong, even when you're falling apart. You're admired for being composed, even when your insides are chaos. You're expected to be okay, always okay. So you learn the rules, say the right things, shrink your sadness into polite phrases. Edit your truth until it sounds like someone else's. And still, you wonder why no one truly sees you. Why your relationships feel like mirrors with fogged glass. Why love feels conditional. Why you feel like a stranger in your own story. It's not because you're unlovable. It's because the version of you that people love isn't really you. You built a prison of politeness, a cage made of compliments and nods. You've become fluent in the language of, "I'm fine," but every sentence costs you a piece of your soul. Let me ask you something. When did you learn that your feelings were too loud? When did you first believe that being honest would make you unworthy? What part of you had to die so the rest of you could be accepted? This is not judgment. This is recognition. Because almost all of us are walking around like this, alive, but ghosted by ourselves. You think you're alone in this, but you're not. You think everyone else is okay, but they're not. They're performing too, smiling through panic, laughing through grief, succeeding while silently wondering what the point is. And yet, there's a strange comfort in this collective pretending. We nod at each other, masks on, roles memorized, hoping no one notices the flicker of pain behind our eyes. But deep down, the more you pretend, the further you drift. The more you adjust, the less you feel. The more you shrink, the heavier life becomes. You can't fake your way into freedom. So I ask you again, who are you without the act? Not the version you show your friends, not the I'm good you offer at work, not the smile you force when your heart is breaking. Who are you when you stop trying to be acceptable? That version of you, the unfiltered one, the unpolished one, isn't your weakness. It's your origin, it's your truth, it's your way back. And yes, taking off the mask will be terrifying. Yes, it will make you feel exposed. Yes, people might not understand. But what's more terrifying is living your whole life unseen. You don't need to keep performing. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to carry the pressure of being fine. You just need to be real, even if your voice shakes, even if your truth is messy, even if it scares you. Because the moment you stop pretending is the moment you begin returning, not to who you were told to be, but to who you actually are. Beneath the layers, beyond the roles, under the silence. That's the place where healing starts. That's the place where love becomes real. That's the place where life begins again. Drop the mask, just for a moment. In the comments, tell me, what have you been pretending is fine? That's actually breaking you inside. Write it like no one's watching. Write it like your truth deserves to be heard. Because maybe, just maybe, this is the first time you let it breathe. There's a silence that doesn't soothe. A silence that wraps around your chest like fog. Not peaceful, not still, just heavy. It's the silence of pretending too long. The silence that follows every "I'm fine," spoken with a cracked voice and a tired smile. No one sees that silence, but it shapes you. It rearranges the architecture of your soul, and you start to forget the sound of your own truth. You become someone who laughs at the right times, says the right things, but feels nothing real. Not because you don't feel, but because the place where your feelings live has become a battlefield. Inside, you carry memories that ache, moments that didn't break you on the outside but shattered something invisible. The friend who walked away without a word, the love you gave that was never returned, the dreams that died in silence because no one believed in them, not even you. The pain you swallowed because expressing it felt like burdening someone. And through it all, you never screamed. You never broke the glass. You just adapted. Like water poured into a cracked vessel, you made yourself fit into what was left. But that's the tragedy, isn't it? That you were hurting deeply, and no one noticed. That your world was burning, and you still managed to show up, smile, and ask how they were doing. That you became so good at pretending, you forgot how to ask for help. And now here you are, alive, breathing, functioning, but with a soul that feels like it's missing pages. Buddhism doesn't romanticize pain. It sees it. It bows to it. It teaches that suffering is not the enemy. Clinging is. Clinging to the idea that you must always be okay. Clinging to the belief that your worth depends on your performance. Clinging to the fear that your truth will scare people away. But pain, when seen fully, becomes a doorway, not a dead end, not a punishment, a path. Because the ache you feel isn't the problem. It's the signal, the alarm that rings when you've wandered too far from yourself. And maybe that's what this moment is. Not a breakdown, but a remembering. Because what if your pain is sacred? What if your emptiness is where new life begins? Yes, pain changes you, but not always in the way you fear. Sometimes it strips away what was never truly yours. Sometimes it reveals how deeply you've been abandoning yourself. Sometimes it teaches you what no comfort ever could, that you are still here, still breathing, still capable of beginning again. The world tells you to hide your wounds, to clean up before being seen, to wait until you've healed before you're allowed to speak. But the truth is, Your wounds speak louder than your mask ever could. And there's a strange beauty in that. A strength in still standing. A grace in still feeling. A quiet rebellion in saying, I'm not okay, but I'm not pretending anymore. Because to be fully alive is to be breakable. And every crack in you is a place where light can enter, if you let it. So sit with your pain, not as your enemy, but as your teacher. What is it trying to show you? What is it asking you to let go of? What have you been running from that actually holds the key to your freedom? You don't have to fix it all right now. You don't have to become a perfect version of yourself. You just have to stop abandoning what's real. And what's real is that you've been strong for too long. You've carried too much without being carried. You've listened to everyone else without being heard, but not anymore. Because your pain is not a flaw. It's your signal fire, calling you back to yourself. You don't need to fear it. You need to feel it. Because maybe that's where the healing begins. Not by escaping the pain, but by finally allowing it to speak. There is a kind of freedom that doesn't roar. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. It arrives softly, like exhaling after holding your breath for years. It's the freedom of not pretending anymore. The moment you drop the mask and nothing falls apart. The moment you speak your truth and you don't vanish. The moment you let go and realize you were never holding anything real. Detachment isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's not about being distant. It's about no longer clinging to illusions. No longer chasing people who only love the version of you that bleeds quietly. You spent years trying to be enough. You shaped yourself into what was palatable. You learned to be likable instead of real. You wore perfection like armor, hoping it would protect your most fragile parts. But that armor became a cage. And now, you're tired. Not just physically, but spiritually exhausted from the effort of becoming someone else. So now, you begin to shed. Not to abandon who you are, but to return to who you've always been, underneath the performance. This is what detachment really means. Letting go of what no longer fits your truth. Letting go of the need to be understood by those who only hear with their fears. Letting go of the approval that costs you your peace. It's realizing that you don't need to be anyone's idea of worthy. You only need to be true. Yes, some people will walk away when you stop performing. Let them. Because if your silence makes someone uncomfortable, they were never listening to begin with. And if your truth makes someone leave, they were never staying for the real you anyway. There is nothing more liberating than not needing to be chosen. There is nothing more sacred than choosing yourself. You are not here to be edited. You are not here to be easier to love. You are here to be whole, raw, real, radiant in your imperfection. Buddhist wisdom whispers this truth gently. Freedom is not in possessing, but in releasing. Not in tightening your grip, but in opening your hand. We suffer not because life is cruel, but because we hold on to what has already gone. So you begin to loosen your grip on who you thought you had to be, on the dreams that were never really yours, on the weight of keeping up appearances, and you begin to walk differently. Not faster, not louder, just lighter. You stop proving. You stop explaining. You stop negotiating your value. Instead, you start listening deeply to the voice inside you that says, "This is who I am, and that is enough." You start showing up without the need to convince anyone. You start speaking without rehearsing. You start existing without apology. And the most beautiful part? You begin attracting people who meet you there, in the unpolished, unscripted, unfiltered space of truth. Because real connection doesn't require performance. It requires presence. You don't have to be perfect to be loved. You don't have to be invulnerable to be respected. You don't have to be fine to be worthy. You only have to be honest. And yes, there will be moments of fear. You'll feel naked without your mask. You'll question whether people will still stay. But here's the paradox. The less you try to be accepted, the more you find yourself surrounded by people who actually see you. The more you let go of needing to be chosen, the more you find spaces where you belong effortlessly. The more you stop holding on to what hurts, the more your hands are free to hold what heals. So this is your quiet revolution. Not to scream louder, but to stop pretending. Not to win them over, but to win yourself back. Not to fix your soul, but to free it. Because in the end, detachment is not the absence of care. It's the presence of self. It's the shift from, what do they think of me, to, what do I know about myself? It's not walking away in bitterness. It's walking forward in truth. No more proving, no more shrinking, no more hiding. Just you, breathing, belonging, becoming. And that is enough. There comes a moment when fighting your pain feels heavier than feeling it. Not because the pain disappears, but because you're done pretending it isn't there. You stop running. You stop fixing. You stop explaining your soul like it's a problem that needs solving. And in that pause, something quiet enters. Not joy, not clarity, but something more ancient. Acceptance. You don't reach it through effort. You don't earn it by being better. You just stop resisting what already is. This is the heart of Buddhist presence. To be exactly where you are, without needing to escape it. To sit in your ache without asking it to leave. To meet your sadness not as a threat, but as a guest. Because all this time you thought healing meant rising above the pain. But sometimes healing is just learning to sit beside it. No rush, no story, no performance. Just breath, just truth, just the unedited reality of this moment. You begin to realize your sadness doesn't need to be silenced. Your confusion doesn't need clarity right now. Your longing doesn't need to be filled. It just needs space. You need space. And in that space, a new kind of peace begins to grow. Not the peace of everything being okay, but the peace of no longer lying to yourself. There is something sacred in surrender. Not the surrender of giving up, but the surrender of giving in to truth, to presence, to what is. It's like finally allowing the rain to fall instead of holding the clouds in place. Like unclenching the fist you didn't realize you were making around your own heart. You've spent so long trying to fix yourself, to improve, to heal, to grow. But maybe the deepest healing doesn't come from becoming more. Maybe it comes from needing less. Less control, less explanation, less certainty, more silence, more stillness, more being. Because sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is to stop trying so hard to be okay, to look at yourself exactly as you are, messy, raw, unfinished, and say, you are allowed. Even like this, you begin to see the illusion of the chase for perfection, the chase for validation, the chase for answers. And when you stop chasing, something profound happens. You catch up to yourself. You meet the part of you that's been waiting patiently. The one who never needed to be fixed, only witnessed. The one who wasn't trying to be impressive, only real. That part knows how to breathe without apology, knows how to cry without shame, knows how to live without pretending. And in that moment, you realize healing was never about becoming something new. It was always about remembering what's always been true. You are not broken. You are becoming. You are not behind. You are blooming, quietly, slowly, honestly. You are not too much. You are just enough for the life you are meant to live. And if no one ever told you this before, let me say it now. You don't need to impress anyone to be loved. You don't need to carry your grief in silence. You don't need to hold yourself together to be worthy. You can breathe. You can rest. You can fall apart and still be whole. Because the truth is, healing doesn't look like victory. It looks like softness. It looks like finally putting down the burden of pretending. It looks like closing your eyes and whispering to yourself, I'm here. I'm staying. No matter what. This is the silence that heals. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of return. A quiet coming home to the self you left behind when pretending felt safer. So, breathe, not to change anything, just to remember you're alive. Sit, not to fix your pain, just to honor it. Be, not to prove your worth, just because you already are. And maybe, just maybe, that's all you ever needed. Not answers, not solutions, just this, to stop fighting your reality, and finally make peace with being human. So I'll leave you with one last question, not to answer with words, but to carry in your chest like a soft echo. And what if the beginning of your healing is the moment you stop pretending you don't need it?